Good evening, and welcome to all listeners and watchers, viewers throughout the state and the United States. You are watching an episode of Dinak Naga's Our People Speak. It's a series with the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center, Tanana Chiefs Conference, and Dinak Naga. I am Sharon Hildebrand. I am tonight's moderator, and tonight's presentation is focused on ceremonial dress or regalia, and we'll hear a little bit more about that afterwards. We want to thank our major sponsors, Doi Unlimited, and during the evening, you can find more shows on the Morris Thompson website. And if you feel compelled to support this type of program, there are links on there as well to show you how much you support our programming. Again, I'm Sharon Hildebrand. I'm from Nulato, where I was raised by my grandmother, Ellen Peters, and my grandfather, Aloysius Peters. I am the Village Outreach Liaison for Doi Unlimited. And this evening, we have Luke Titus and Miranda Wright. Luke was born and raised in Old Mento. He attended boarding school in Wrangell and Mount Etchcombe High School. He also attended UAF and Mount Etchcombe for a while, and then Bible school, whereupon he became an Episcopal ordained priest in 1970. Luke served on the Yukon-Kaikuk School District School Board, which services 9 schools. He is now involved with cultural-related events and is a UAF elder mentor. He also served on the Dinakanaga Board of Directors and the board's first chief. Luke is an epitome of our native culture, born of a time when our language was spoken and where our land provided our every need. Many call upon him for his knowledge and our culture and traditions to help guide and direct us for the future generations. Welcome, Luke.
Yeah, thank you.
Miranda Wright, a member of the Nulato tribe and a shareholder of Doi Unlimited. She is a Koyukon Athabascan. Wright has a varied career and has been a business owner much of her life. She and her late husband, Gareth, owned and operated a construction company in the Fairbanks area for many years. Together, they also operated a sled dog breeding and racing kennel. She owned a fur business and focused on fur hats, fur mitts, and other fur accessories reflective of her Athabascan heritage. She hand-sewed the items and took great pride in the quality of her products. Wright shifted her focus on serving her people in various capacities. As executive director, she was instrumental in the growth of the Doyon Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provides scholarships to shareholders of Doi Unlimited. Her passion for helping students succeed led her to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. There she served in the dual capacity as director and assistant professor in the Department of Alaska Native Studies and Rural Development. Through the years, Wright advanced her interest in business, education, community planning, and development with services on the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, Fairbanks North Star Borough Economic Development Council, Holland America Community Advisory Board, and today she continues to serve on the Doyon Board of Directors and has done so since 1995. Wright holds a bachelor's degree and master's of arts degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Miranda makes her home here in Fairbanks. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
We have a great show for you this evening, and we have respected elders and leaders, Luke Titus and Miranda Wright. This evening's topic will focus on ceremonial dress or regalia, as it honors our ceremonies and how to respect the culture and traditions behind its creation and use. But first, before we start, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're from and some of your upbringing?
I grew up in Minto in the village, and this was before the machinery came out in villages like chainsaws and snow machines and things like that. We when we went out on trap line, we had to use the kerosene lamp to do our work at night. And living with nature teaches you a lot of things. I'm very fortunate to be able to go out trapping before I went away to boarding school, and that was another thing that came up with us and learning our culture. And a lot of people think that we were taken away from it, but we were fortunate to have more elders left in our villages to help teach us and carry on these traditional things that we have questions about. So,
Thank you, Luke. Miranda, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you're from and some of your upbringing?
Certainly, Sharon, and thank you for having me here with you all tonight. I was raised in the village of Nolato. I was actually born in winter camp out on the headwaters of the Unoko River. And like Luke, I was born in an era where technology was very scarce. So we traveled by dog team. We lived, our water was chopping ice from the river and hauling snow for our laundry, that type of stuff. During the summer, we'd come out to Unoko River after the spring thaw, after the ice would move, and then we'd spend the summers along the Yukon River in our salmon fishing camp. And, we'd go into Nolato on Sundays because Nolato was a very strong Catholic community. So we'd go in Sundays, that was a day of rest for the family, and we'd visit with Grandma and all the other members of the community and go around and have tea with everyone. I was raised in a very traditional family. Both my parents were very fluent Athabascan speakers, so that's what I was raised with, in a very traditional way of living off the land. And all of our clothes were made, when we pluck our geese in the springtime, we saved all the down, and Mom made all of our winter parkas out of all homemade garments. So, yes.
Very good. Welcome, Miranda. So we were having a discussion earlier about the meaning of regalia and ceremonial dress, and you were sharing some of the meaning behind that. Can you tell us what's the difference between regalia and ceremonial dress?
Thank you, Sharon. That was a question I really struggled with when I was looking at some of the questions that were going to be posed to us tonight. Regalia is a word that we don't have in our native language. So I kept thinking, what am I going to talk about? What exactly is regalia? So I went to the dictionary and I looked to see what Oxford had to say and what Webster had to say, and both of them basically said that it was attire that was worn for special occasions by the royalty, things like this. And I thought, well, we don't have royalty. So I kept going back, through my mind and thinking about this. And I came to the perspective that we are really talking about ceremonial dress, the special garments that our people wore during ceremony. I mean, we don't have, the big pageants and this type of, I don't know, I just felt like we were talking about the crown or the monarchy or something in England when you were talking about regalia. And I think ceremonial dress is actually a more meaningful term as to what we want to discuss today as far as our native attire goes.
That's really good feedback. Thank you. Did you have something to share in that too?
yes, I have something to share. You probably might hear this before that as students going away to boarding school. And when we got to boarding school, I did not know my mother had put my regalia in my suitcase. And when it was check-in time, they didn't take it out of my suitcase until way in May. They had something going on in the campus, and they took all the regalia. I remember the students from up north and had their parkas, real beautiful parkas, and the school I don't know why they did this to us, but they took all our regalia and they burned it. You know, coming from that part of the whole situation, it kind of makes you real humble. It makes you wonder what's going on in this world. And our parents had to deal with it because they asked what happened to your regalia. And from that, I was told that, that's something like this can happen to anybody, and that I was to be strong and hold on to our culture, whatever it is. And now that I'm older and elder, I see what the people were saying. They were saying that it continues in a way, the tradition of our people, that we're able to carry this on into this future of our young people or older people, and be able to be proud of who we are and where we come from. And what happened to me is in the past, and a lot of students were involved in that. So I just wanted to bring that out, that this is not the end of it. We continue in.
That's a beautiful story, Luke.
Thank you.
I believe that you guys are proof that our culture continues despite what had happened in our past, and we're stronger going forward. Thank you. So, talking about ceremonial dress and regalia, you sort of touched on it earlier, and when we were talking and visiting and sharing, what does it mean to you?
You know, that's a real good question, because to me, it's not just the garments that you're wearing, but it's the source of where those garments came from. You know, we are a very subsistence-based culture. We honor our animals that give themselves to us for food, shelter, and clothing. And that part, the clothing part, I think is very important. So when I wear my winter boots with a moose skin sole and the fur tops, it's an honor to know that those animals gave themselves to us for our survival. And when you wear those, like Luke said, you know, that feeling that you have in here of who you are and how you identify with your surroundings and your resources is so powerful. I mentioned earlier, I think while we were talking, how I get butterflies when I think about those types of things. When I was growing up, we didn't have a lot of fancy clothes. And I don't know whether you want me to continue with this or cut it off here and talk about our other ceremonies a little later and how we use our attire for different ceremonies.
Yeah, just share how you feel.
Like the shirt I'm wearing, you know, we call it mitzahulan, the dress that has a hood. And this is worn a lot during the summer. You wear the hood because of all the mosquitoes and gnats and bugs that we have. The same thing with our, the men wore the moosehide summer jackets. We used them as a summer jacket. And they had hoods on them also. And again, it was to keep the bugs away. They also wore one-piece leggings with a moccasin attached to the legs, and it was pants. And again, it was to protect your legs from mosquitoes and other little critters, plus going through the brush. There's a lot of protection for them in that sense. And then they wore the long tunics that went over the top of their trousers. So they're, you know, that again, very much respectful of the source of those materials. It was very important. The women didn't wear as much hide garments as the men, because the men were the providers. And it varies in each region that we come from with each cultural group, and I'm sure some of the traditions that Luke will share will be a little different than mine also. But I'm speaking of the people that I come from and the traditions that we had. During the winter, we wore fur garments. And a lot of times, because of the Western world that we live in today, many of us don't speak our native language, so our thoughts are very Westernized, just like the word regalia coming up in this whole discussion, which is more of a Western concept. So things have changed rapidly with Western education and a lot of the different things that are going on in our world. So again, the way we dress and how we use our garments has changed through time. From the time that I'm speaking of, where women wore mainly cloth materials or lighter, very plain moosehide tunics or dresses. We didn't have a lot of beadwork that was saved for our men. All the dentalia shells that we used to decorate their leggings and their summer shirts, and they wore it in their hair. And that signified the men as the providers and how important they were to the survival of our culture.
Luke, what does ceremonial dress, what does that mean to you?
It has a significant meaning to it. Some people will know and understand, and people that know, been taught that what the ceremonial dress is like. It's not something that you can go to the store and buy something. It's not like that at all in our culture. It's more meaningful for someone to be able to get that now. I'm using a chief coat, and I earned it. I had to be chief of Minto to get this, and I did not know that at the time that all the responsibility, everything, the honor, that being chief has a lot of meaning to it. And when they put this on me, it was took on a different meaning to be able to not only being elected chief, but the people to elect the person has to have honor and respect from the village and honor among other leaders that they come to. And there's another part, and there's the one nose sleeves that's used as a vest, and it's different occasions, respect out of the what we call the men's role, and what that person is doing in his village. It shows that he's a hunter. It shows that he provides for his village in a unique way, and I can see that as we. And when I first heard that about the dancers, the native dancers, and I made a remark about getting my dance costume, and they all laughed at me and they say, "You're not using costume. It's not a costume that you're gonna put on. You're gonna put on a regalia." And I learned new word that day, so it helped me to go forward with that. I think it's very important that we help each other with this meaning of what's going on with our regalia, and do away with the dance costume, so to speak. And it's then it was all different material. This is all hide, tanned hide. And for someone to do that, someone to put on that, it means a lot to that person, and also means a lot to the community. So that's what it means.
Beautiful. Thank you. So, We talked about native dress and shirts and jackets, and you talked about some of the boots and caribou leggings. What's the reason or the purpose for the creation of wearing ceremonial dress? What are some of the reasons behind it?
Again, I'm going to speak from the perspective of my own culture and from the Nolado area. A lot of times when we're creating ceremonial dress, it's during our memorial celebrations. And we have Nolado and Caltech currently are the two villages that are very well known for the memorial ceremony called the stick dance. In our language, we would say hiya. And during that ceremony, we honor all of the people who assisted us when we laid to rest a loved one that we lost. It's very much like in the Western culture when you go down to the funeral home and pay for the burial cost at a funeral home. Mm-hmm. In our native way, there's people within our community who take care of all of those types of services. There was a lot of bloodletting early in the days where they mummified our deceased. There's different protocols that they were familiar with of how you took care of someone who may have been a spiritual intermediary or a woman or an infant. There were all different types of services that were provided. So those people were highly respected, and during our memorial ceremony, they were honored by being dressed in a whole new suit of clothes. And the ceremony is generally held in the winter months, so they would get generally a fur parka, a fur hat, fur mitts or moosehide mitts, boots. In the earlier days, they used, before like snow pants were available to us, they made leggings out of wolf skin, wolf leggings from the thigh down to the ankle for the men. And that's what they wore when they were out. So it was a very solemn ceremony. When they, there's a whole transformation process, a spiritual involvement with all of this. So they would dress these people in all of those clothes, and that was when we made those types of garments. And people wore them, they were everyday clothes basically in those early days. That's what we worked in. I mean, you'd never think of wearing a fur parka to be splitting wood, but that's what we did. So it wasn't so much. I guess that's why I had difficulty earlier when we were discussing the idea of regalia versus ceremonial dress. It was given to you in a ceremony, and you were dressed in it during that ceremony, and in a very honored fashion, just as Luke was talking about receiving his chief's jacket. But then it became your regular wear also.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Luke, what is the reason or the purpose for the creation in wearing ceremonial dress? What's the reason behind it?
Well, that was handed down through many generations of people. And each generation would say something. And you notice that we don't have things written down in our culture as to this is why you do this is the reason that you're going to do that. And the real thing about all that we're talking about is that we believe and the animals that are given to us is given to us for a reason. And we have a lot of respect for the animals that we come in contact with and where we're living. So with that advice, I call it advice, that we're giving the opportunity to learn the process for the ceremonial way of our people. A lot of respect goes into that. And we hear a lot of that when we're growing up, not only from the like respect the elders, respect the mothers, respect the fathers, everything that goes into that, I think is what's really the thing that's going to help us carry this on.
So when you're wearing those ceremonial dress, you're being honored, but you're also honoring those animals then, huh?
Yes, that's right. Make sure that these young people don't make fun of it when they put something on and laugh about it. It's not that. It's having respect for what's given to us. It's honor through our culture.
You want to touch on that too? How we're honoring the animals by the clothing that we're wearing?
Well, definitely. It's like I mentioned, before, that being people with a very strong subsistence background and really believing that the animals give themselves to us and that we have a symbiotic relationship with the animal world. We are always taught never to talk about certain animals or even mention them by name. We had used circumlocution, or where we spoke about the animals in without using their name. There was a lot of symbols and different nicknames, I guess you might call them, that we use for animals instead of using their direct name. And again, out of respect, because we felt that they would hear us or receive negative vibes from us and, create some catastrophic results for many people. So there was, yes, a very, very strong honoring of the animals.
Was that the same thing when you were growing up too?
Yes, same thing.
When you were growing up, who was making the ceremonial dress and who usually received it?
I would say that the most the elderly ladies did that, and doing a lot of sewing. Skin sewing is an art. It's something that you just don't get a skin and needle and try to sew. It takes a lot of skill to do that, and how you do it, how you sew it, and what you sew it with. And they made they didn't have thread. They didn't, no thing is a thread that they sew with. They made thread out of the sinew from the animal. And that's what holds clothing together. So there was story that goes along with each item that they have. And they would tell the story that how the thing was made, the clothing, whatever it is. And then to me, the story goes a long way to help us to understand what's going on there.
You reminded me of a story when when we sit around when someone has passed and we're sewing and stuff. There's usually a lot of laughter that happens, and that helps with the healing process. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to share on some of that?
Well, you're talking about who does what, basically. And I want to share a story about my late grandmother, who was close to 100 years old when she passed, her Grandma Martha. She was one of the last members of our community to experience a puberty corner. When she became a woman, they put them in a corner or away from the general public for 40 days, at least a year, but with her it was 40 days. And during that time, they bring in different elders to teach you some of the arts that you would need as a woman: how to cook, how to prepare certain foods, how to cut fish, how to sew. And during when she was relating her experience to me, she said she had two different grandmas who came in to teach her how to sew. And she said they had people who were specialists, I guess you would call them in the Western way. One grandma knew how to do fancy work. And so she taught Grandma how to do fancy sewing. The other grandma was more of a utilitarian type of a seamstress, but people went to her when they wanted. The hunters needed strong water boots or strong mitts for going out on the trap line, clothes that would wear really well during hard labor. So there were a distinction between how women sewed, just like there was a distinction between how women, this woman was really good at preparing game meat, but this one was really good at preparing fish. So I think those were very important distinctions. How it was almost like we had specialized talents within our community also.
Very interesting. Let's see. How long has ceremonial dress been a part of Native culture?
It was, as far as you can tell, it's just time immemorial that these things are carried on. There's just no such thing as time, but a lot of, what the people do is carried on to each other. And I think the one strong point in our native culture is putting someone away, at the end of their life. And they say, do it to each person. And so therefore we do these things for different ones. The one of the things I like to bring out is that somewhere along the line, there was someone would come along and give me something that I saw this happen good many times with the elder men, that they would come along, and there was in a movie, and it was showing this man left his son in the hospital, and before he went out, he reached in his pocket and he pulled out his pocket knife. That is a cultural thing. That man told his son, I skinned good many fur with this. He said, I'm going to give this to you wherever you're going. And that person is George Atla, world champion musher, that they did this to. So the practice of our culture just carried on to different ones.
Thank you. Miranda, how long has our ceremonial dress been a part of our Native culture?
Like Luke said, time immemorial. Again, it all goes back to the fact that it's part of everything that we wore in an everyday life. And the ceremonies are always a part of our tradition also. Whether it's a naming ceremony where you have a young boy that receives his first quiver, and that becomes part of his ceremonial garb. It's just very important. Or a young man catching his first weasel, and that becomes a ceremony because the significance of that particular animal and the respect that people have for the least weasel, and the belief that by catching such a clever little animal, that young man will become a great hunter. Mm-hmm. So, the ceremonies go back, and again, he's given a special ceremony and given, like either a bow and arrow or a beaded quiver or, something that is part of his ceremonial dress. So, the stories are just numerous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As you were talking, I was thinking about those white weasel coats that I'd see and it was adornedly decorated on jackets and stuff, and it looked like a great way to honor those animals as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was very important with our young men. The least weasel was a very good mouser. it was like people having a domestic cat. So people did not mind having the weasel around their property. But they were very fast and very clever little creatures and very hard to catch. That's why it was such an honor when a young man would catch one.
Cool. Luke, do you have any memories that stand out with you as you were growing up with regards to seeing ceremonial dress at events or people?
Yeah, I see that. I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that, and mostly in say, I saw one time that there's something happened to the boys, say the boys or the men were all together hunting, and something happened during the hunt, and everybody was gathering up, and this old man was talking. He started talking to us, like giving us advice on what happened in the hunting party, and this young man was there. So this old man called him out. He called him out, and the young man came up and he sat down by this elderly man. And the elderly man talked to him and told him that whatever you do and whatever is going on with us in today, you have to learn to take care of yourself. What you did is uncalled for. You never should have done that. And what did he do? He got angry, he got upset, he got mad. He took his paddle and he just hit that tree. And when he hit that tree, he broke his paddle, that young man. And that old man went over, pick up that paddle. You see. And he tell that young man, anger is something that hunters need to, not only hunters, fathers, uncles, anybody, we need to learn how to cope with those kind of things in everyday life. He get that broken paddle, he went over to that boy, and he just dropped it by him. He tell that boy, he said, think about it. Think about what you did and make yourself another paddle. Don't get somebody else to do it for you. You learn a valuable lesson. So, and carrying on our tradition and over anger, I think that was something that I really thought about. And a lot of times we get upset about things, and especially my boys, I tell them, you always get upset with your cars and, throw your tools around. I tell you that story so you learn how to do that. So.
Very good. Thank you, Luke. Miranda, is there any particular event or ceremony that you recall of first seeing Native ceremonial dress, and what stood out to you?
Again, I go back to the Hia ceremony, our stick dance. I want to say I was maybe 6 years old the first time I witnessed one. I was young enough that my father put me on his shoulders. Well, he took me around the Hia pole. But during that time, it's a very moving time, because part of the ceremony is they bring in animal pelts, like very powerful animals that are perceived to be very powerful in our culture, like the wolf and the wolverine. They bring those in as part of the gifts that will be given away. And they do a dance marathon that's, probably 12 hours, chanting with all of the songs that they have for that memorial ceremony. And then they have another night where the evening is spent, where they dress the people that are being honored, as I mentioned a little earlier. And that is so impressive. It is so impressive to see the people, so many people, dressed in all of this fine fur garments. It's just the big wolf ruffs, the fur boots, just the whole attire. You don't see that very often, at least at that period of time. You didn't see so many people dressed in new fur garments, traditional ceremonial dress like that. I mean, so to see, half a dozen to a dozen people all dressed up, I mean, it was just overwhelming for me as a child.
About how old were you?
I was figuring I was like 6 years old. I mean, if I got a pair of new boots for Christmas, that was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And to see all of these people with a whole suite of clothes, it was just very, very impressive.
Something else. Beautiful. We're talking about ceremonial dress and regalia and how they were used for special moments. Why were they used for only special moments? And I think you guys touched on it briefly, that a lot of work and love went into it, and those animals weren't easy to get then, right? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Let me tell you something more about the Hia ceremony. When, it's a very, there's a lot of belief associated with this entire ceremony. And when you're dressing the person that you're honoring, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a repayment for the services that they rendered. But it's also a transition, a final transition for the spirits of the person you lost. I'll take my father as an example. We had a ceremony for him here a few years back. When the people are dressed, and we're all in the community center, and they're dressed, and then they leave the community center, and they go out wherever the designated area is, and they have all of their old garments in a satchel or a bag, and they have a little ceremony that they perform. And that ceremony is a transition of spirits. That person who is being dressed at that point transforms into my father. So he is now representing my family. So when they return into the community center, that person returns as my father. So that the clothing that they're wearing is a big part of that whole transformation. And again, that symbiotic relationship I mentioned with the spirit world and the animal world. I mean, this is stuff that my elders will probably turn over in their grave that I'm sharing this publicly. But it's a very strong belief. And then we have another period for the next 24 hours or so where that person is basically my father. So the next day they go through the whole community and they go door to door to every home wearing the ceremonial dress that they were given the evening before. And they're going through every home. The homes will have food out that they share with everyone that comes through. Finger foods, salmon strips. Anyhow, that person then bids farewell to the members of the community. And when that particular part of the ceremony is over, then that transformation occurs again and my father's spirit is released eternally. So again, the ceremonial dress in that particular instance is one of the strongest ceremonies that we have for ceremonial dress. Mm-hmm. And it's a very important part of that whole spiritual transformation that we believe so strongly in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Luke, can you tell me about a time when you were young and why it's so important for our ceremonial dress, the significance? Because you guys shared earlier, it was something that wasn't taken lightly, and it took a long time, right, We didn't have a lot of resources then. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I had a person that used to visit me all the time. Now it's very fortunate to have this person come to where I live. And Chief Andrew Isaac he had a lot of stories to tell, and he come to my house, and I thought to myself, why is he here? I'm just nothing. I'm not even on the council or things. Try to figure out why he come to my house all the time. And he didn't say anything why he came. He just sat down and drink coffee or drink tea. And one time he had this was, he showed me this where he had it in his hand. He said, I start telling story. He said, I went to a village one time, and when I got there, I realized that I forgot my necklace. I don't have my necklace with me. And he says, so I went around the village and I tried to find somebody that had one necklace and I could use. And he starts saying that he can't say anything without this on, without his necklace. It meant so much. There was so much that value to him that he was brought up, and that what happened in this process is that when this was placed on a young person, that was to be carried on traditionally, irregardless of what happened to our culture. We need to try to pass this on to our young people if we can. And to this day, I'm real thankful for the person that visited me. He taught me a lot. He didn't say, you do this. He never said it that way. Neither did Peter John, traditional chief, or all the former leaders. They never said that. They just did these things out of the heart, out of their mind, and where they're going to lead our people. So I hope and pray that I'll do the same thing for our tribe and our culture.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thinking back about when you were growing up and you talked about your native dress, and have you seen it transition? Do you see different styles transition? You were talking about your dress shirt and thinking about when you were younger, how things change over time. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
A lot of change has occurred. Again, like I said, we didn't see that many people wearing fancy clothes. Everybody worked so hard, and with the Western education that many of us have gone through, and our children and our grandchildren are going through, life is a lot easier for them today than it was for many of us in those earlier times. The cash economy is a lot stronger than what it was, so people can buy furs rather than going out trapping them. So now you have, my grandkids all wear beaded slippers. For their birthdays or Christmas, I'm making beaded slippers for them. We have statewide celebrations like WEO that is held here in Fairbanks, and there's another event in Anchorage. We have the Festival of Native Arts, where people come in with dance groups. So now all the dancers are wearing ceremonial dress for dancing. And during WEO, they have parka parades, parka contests. So people are displaying all of those beautiful parkas and moose skin jackets and vests, and baby contests where even babies now are being dressed in ceremonial garbs. And, so there's just a lot of change from what we traditionally understood to be ceremonial dress, like the chief's coat being and the necklace that Luke wears. You know, the way they were gifted to him. Now a lot of those things are changing, and you're seeing so many of our people wearing some of those traditional dress without a lot of significance behind why they're wearing them.
Luke, have you seen the way people wear clothes from when you were younger change to today? Have you seen it change through the years?
One change I see is the necktie. And I think that the big discussion on that took place because our traditional chief, Peter John, never did wear a necktie. He always said, "This is my necktie right there." And they brought that up in Juneau, one of the representatives, and they said that was okay for him to use a beaded bow. That one was handmade beaded bow. And so it did come up with our people at one time or another. And then the thing is that the people that did this have a lot of respect for their culture and go forward and things like this. So we're able to learn from them also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How should we show respect for these items that we might have, these ceremonial dress items? How do we show respect for them? Maybe when we're putting them away, or you talked about it earlier and how you show respect for people from different areas. Can you explain some of that to me?
I'd be glad to, Sharon. You know, I remember an elder who's no longer with us used to. I was taking some sewing lessons from her, and she said, "Treat your furs and your hides as the most precious silk. Don't just throw them in a bag. Make sure you fold them just so, and that you put them away very neatly and with respect, and thank those animals that gave themselves for what you have." You know, that was one way of doing it. Another time I was at a cultural event that was going on here in Fairbanks, and my grandmother that I mentioned earlier, Grandma Martha, was with me, or I had taken her with me to enjoy the activities at the event. And another lady came and joined us from down in our area, and there was a group of Eskimo dancers, just beautiful fur parkas with the big sunshine ruffs, and one of the dancers had a pair of beaded moosehide gloves on as they were dancing. And this other gal who had joined us said, "Oh my, look at that person trying to copy the Indian cultures, wearing those beaded gloves." And like Luke said, how elders admonish you, Grandma reached over and put her hand on this lady, and she said, "Ha, don't say that. That person probably has a friend from our country, and they gave them those gloves in their friendship. So that person out there that's dancing is honoring their friend that gave them those gloves by wearing them in public at this dance." And that respect for that gift, I think, was very important.
Thank you. It's a good reminder that we're not all the same, but we can honor one another by wearing those other traditional items. Lou, can you share a little bit with us and how we might show respect towards our native ceremonial dress?
Yes, I think the way that we're taught, or the way that things come about, like in the native way, we say there's a lot of discussion about men and the women's role in our native culture. And I saw this happen in our village, and this how is that chief going to react to this situation that's coming up? So they run to his cabin, and they told him somebody was coming to Minto, and so they knew his background, they knew his belief and what he believed in the role, the woman's role. And Rose Maher was coming to Minto. She's president of Doyan, one of the leading people to come. Then they tell Peter John, because he had this thing about Native women participating in such activities. And of course, those of us that were there with him, were kind of thinking, hey, we'll go over to his house, we'll go over and see what he say about this situation. So they ran up to his cabin, and they came in, and they went over to Peter John, and they tell him, somebody's here to see you. They want to visit you, talk to you. They say, he knew that it was Rose, and he's kind of moved around in his chair, and he kind of get to brace himself for this entry into his cabin. And us too, all kind of sitting back and wow, this is a big event taking place. And when they let Rose come in, she kind of, in a bashful way, stood by the door. And kind of, you could tell right away, what should I do? Should I just run up to the chief and give him a hug? And she talked about this afterward, how she felt. She said, I felt so scared. She said, I'm coming into the big chief's house and things like that. She said, but from the moment I walked in, I felt like I was welcome, she said. And Peter John knew she was there, and he said, honey, say. So Rose walked over toward him and walked right up to him, he said, and he made motion to her to sit down. Okay. And he took Rose's hand. He shook her hand. And he just said, I want to welcome you on behalf of our people that you come here, and have a lot of respect for your leadership. He's saying. And something like that, I think, is really awesome. When our leaders do this, they show us how to treat each other, even though it was a role that we think it should be divided. It was not divided. It was showing respect for women, showing respect for leadership. And I really was thankful that I was a part of that in our village.
Beautiful. Masi.
Yeah.
It was so awesome because she showed respect for the old chief by going to visit him, and then he reciprocated that respect also by inviting her in. That's really powerful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We're nearing the top of the hour, but before we do get to closing comments, I was hoping you both can share a little with regards to chief's necklaces and protocols. It's been TCC has shared some articles, and Danakanaga has shared some information for our young people to know about. And I was wondering if you both can share some information on the chief's necklaces.
I'd be happy to. I'm going to kind of defer to Luke after I tell a brief story, because from where I come from, we don't have the chief necklaces like they do in the Tanana Indian areas. However, in my role as a member of the Doyan board, I was gifted a chief necklace at a potlatch here in Fairbanks. And I can't remember who was in the leadership at the time, but they told a story like Luke shared earlier about how it came about and how it's passed on. So I understood the significance of receiving a chief necklace. And when that was put over my neck at that potlatch, my heart palpitated. I mean, the feeling was so strong. Now, when I'm here and I'm at a Doyon meeting, not just necessarily here, but whenever I'm at a Doyon meeting, I wear my chief's necklace because that's the role that it was given to me as a representative. When I'm in my home community in Nolato, I do not wear the chief's necklace because it's just a totally different cultural respect. So with that, I think I'll let Luke share the significance of it to his people.
Share the importance of the chief's necklace and what protocols our young people should follow with regards to the chief's necklace. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I like to bring out a point that when someone has a chief necklace like this, they really try hard to tell this person to take care of that, wherever he put it away where he could use it again. I think what really made me begin to be open about this is when we went to boarding school, a lot of our tradition, a lot of the cultural things that happened to us. And I didn't say anything about the language, but for speaking my language, they used to punish us real bad. Some of us, we talk about it. And they used to get our, say, regalia. We get our ornaments that we have, this necklace. And of all things to be taken away and to destroy those things just because they want us to stop what we're doing. But I'll tell you, people, I'll tell you something. Never stop. Don't stop for anybody in your walk, in your culture. Because I'm glad I was able to be redeemed from the life of alcohol and drugs. I'm glad I saw the light enough to carry on my tradition. I'm really proud to do this as an elder, because my time is getting short now, and people ask me how old I am, and I don't want to tell you, but I'll be 80 years old here pretty soon. So, and I just thank the higher power for that we can have these things in a sober, clean way. And to go forward with this, I hope you enjoy this. Whatever it is, do your best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Like you said, we're nearing the end, but before we close out, what sort of advice do you have for our youth to carry forward our traditions with Native, the dress, ceremonial dress and such? How can they carry that forward, and how can they do that?
Well, like I mentioned, a lot have changed and perceptions have changed, and we have evolved, and a lot of our traditions have also evolved with our younger people. And I think the main thing that they should know is to have respect. I can't stress it enough. We mentioned the connections with our animals. You think of like the dentalia necklace. Years ago, when those came to be, the dentalia is a they would find in the lakes. So the men that got dentalia would have to dive down into the lakes and hold their breath and be able to recover the dentalia shells. That's why they were so important, and they were our money. That's what we exchanged things with back in the days. So knowing the history of your culture and respecting that history, I think is very important. And I think whenever someone is gifted with the privilege of a grandmother sewing them a dress or a jacket or a vest or slippers or whatever, is to treat it with the greatest pride and honor.
Luke, what is some of your advice for our youth to carry forward our traditions of Native dress? What are some of your advice to them to carry forward our traditions of Native dress?
The thing is that a lot of times people will say they should do this, they should do that, they should say this, they should, and then our people never said that. If they see something that needs to be done, they stood up and they did it. And here in Tanana Chief Conference, there's a meeting going on. All the leaders were up on stage, and I saw this one person going up there without a necklace. He didn't have anything. He didn't even have a necktie on, that guy. You know, I tell somebody in the table, I say, we have to help that guy. We need to help him out some way. This guy is not supposed to get up on stage. He's the leader, and he's not supposed to get up on stage like that. So somebody had a necklace in their pocket, so I took that and I went up there and I talked to this person. I told him, I hope you learned something today. Just like that young man broke his paddle. See, I'd get that necklace. I said, never get on stage again without this. Put this on, and right away we'll all know that you're a leader. So wear it with pride. Do it with love in your heart. It was, he touched me one time. He said, thank you for your word. It was, so anything that we see like that, we're not being discriminatory against people because they don't do things in our culture. It's not that. They need to learn. They need to appreciate what's going on. So we step in and we try to make it available for everybody. And I think we could hope it'll continue on like that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Lead with love and lead with respect. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you both especially for sharing. This was a very, very beautiful evening. Time went by so fast. And thank you all to our listeners and our viewers for tuning in. Thank you to Doi Unlimited that we can put together these programs that are put on by the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center, Denakanaga, and Tanana Chiefs Conference. I'm Sharon Hildebrand, and this is Luke Titus and Miranda Wright. Thank you for joining us. Have a good evening. Masi.